Out to the long-awaited sequel to Pixar's movie Inside Out, which I remember vividly seeing in theaters back in 2015. I remember, and it didn't dawn on me. Catherine and I rewatched the first one last week before the new one came out, and I saw that movie early. They actually had an advanced screening thing for it at AMC, and I saw that movie early, and it was a packed house. It was packed. Think it was sold out, and I remember that movie just being inspiring to watch and seeing the reactions of people all like laughing consistently. Like that felt, I don't want to be hyperbolic, because I'm honestly one of the few people I think that liked Finding Dory more than Finding Nemo. I don't want to say maybe the last great theatrical Pixar movie was Inside Out, because Soul technically didn't get a Pixar or didn't get a theatrical release. So I want to say it was like the last, I would say, complete knockout from Pixar.
I
Inside
agree.
Out 2, though, there was reason to be a little bit trepidatious with this sequel, I guess, if for no other reason than Pete Docter, the director, who I've said for years is the creative genius behind Pixar. He really is. He's the chief creative officer. He's responsible for Up. He's responsible for Inside Out. He's responsible for, I think, some of the most emotionally affecting movies of the company, and also some of the most ingenious concepts of the movies. He's only a producer on Inside Out. He was the writer and co-director of the first movie, or the co-writer and director of the first movie. And it was fascinating to listen to him talk about the collaborative process of writing that screenplay,
Okay.
and his
Can you hear
ideas and
me?
how it really took shape. This
Okay.
new one is directed by Kelsey Mann, and this is her
I was like,
directorial
fuck.
debut. The only thing that she's directed was this Monsters Inc. short, Party Central. That was the only thing that she's directed, which is one of the more
Hmm.
forgettable shorts that they've done. I'm not gonna
You
lie
know,
there. I can't remember even what it preceded.
I'm doing
It
all
might
right.
have
I'm doing
preceded
all right.
Inside
I
Out,
can't get
quite
my camera to
frankly.
pop up
Now
on
that
here,
I
but I
think
don't really
about it,
think
it
it
might have
matters.
preceded Inside Out. But first off, you could tell shit at Disney's bad. They don't
You
even
can hear
have
me okay?
shorts. They don't even have a short attached to this movie, which I
Okay,
thought
I
was
was
odd.
wondering if I was like, I know I adjust my time so that I skip the previews, but I'm like, shit, did I miss the short? I don't know.
You know what I hate to say, and it's because
Yeah, go
they're
ahead and send the
doing
Zoom
everything they
link.
can to bump up that catalog on their streaming service, but a lot of that stuff is now going to Disney Plus,
That's what I
or
think.
a lot of those
I think that was part of
concepts
the reason it fucked me over last week, was
um
because I just noticed
like
now it's Zoom
Forky, like he has a
Workplace.
bunch of shorts on Disney Plus. So a lot of those concepts that were going to be eventually used for like a short film have turned into like mini series of like 4 minute shorts on Disney Plus, and they release a whole season of them at once for you to turn on and have your kid be entertained for about like 20 minutes or something.
They
Hmm.
haven't been especially memorable recently. Elementals last year, if you remember, was this really crappy up short, Carl's Date,
Yeah.
which I thought was a real bastardization way to do Up. And to make, like, after that movie and that beautiful movie, to then make it about the old man getting a date. I don't care if it was like 7 minutes long, it was still stupid. But Inside Out 2, though, really feels like an event unto itself. This is a movie, a high concept animated movie, a fantasy that really beams with color and life and imagination. And above all else, because it's not perfect, I don't think it's as good as the original Inside Out. Few movies are. But I think with this sequel, I think even because I've seen some people be more significantly critical towards this thing. And I guess I would say this: it might not do things completely different from the first Inside Out. It's structurally very similar. But what it does really well is the hardest thing it probably could have done. It was its biggest challenge, was to communicate anxiety and the effects of anxiety to young children and also make it relatable for adults. That's a hard thing to do. And I think this movie knocks it out of the park. I think the hardest thing this movie had on its plate, it accomplishes beautifully. And that's a big credit to the screenwriters Meg LeFauve and Dave Holstein, for what they were able to do, not only with creating a character of anxiety that was believable, villainous, but also likable in a way, understandable. And I also think I'll talk more about it later too, but I also believe that when it's all said and done, Maya Hawke does an outstanding job as Anxiety. I think is the voice. I think it's one of the best voice acting performances, if not the best, that I've seen so far this year. That's how I'm setting the table for Inside Out 2. We'll go Dom and then Joe. General thoughts on Inside Out 2.
I very much enjoyed it, and I have had no doubt that this would do well in theaters, critically, and at the box office, simply because this is the most millennial coded, emotionally, conscious movie. The original was too, and that's why it resonated so well. This is just an not to say making movies is easy, but this idea, it feels so damn easy to just churn out ideas and stories and plot lines, right? It's such a straightforward idea that it's like, no, you stick to this. This is a little girl growing up, and all the metaphors are just in her head, and it's all visual metaphor, right? That's it. That's literally mechanically what it is. And it's life lessons in emotional development. And that, goddamn, how many times has Pixar made us cry since its inception? This was very much built for that. Did I cry at this movie? No. Were there very strong emotional scenes? Absolutely. And I appreciate them. And maybe this is just me getting older, right? But still, certainly, I very much appreciate it for continuing to honestly just make conscious these emotional concepts, such as, of course, anxiety, but other things too, such as live and online. It's Sleepless with Steve and the Movie Book Club with your host, Steve Pulaski.
Back and better than ever, Sleepless with Steve, live on YouTube on this Wednesday evening, smack dab in the middle of the month of July. We are back. Good to be with you wherever you may be, however you may be listening. Anything significant happen in the world since our last show last week? Anything significant? It's kind of the times you wish you would be living under that metaphorical rock everybody talks about, if nothing else. Good to be with you guys today, though. Joe Viso, Dominic Guanzon, the two men that make this show what it is. We are here today to talk about Fly Me to the Moon, brand new Scarlett Johansson, Channing Tatum, romantic comedy drama. It's a lot to unpack with that thing that I'm still not quite sure what I watched. We will dive into that, though, coming up. And then we start the show with a little in memoriam segment. And I think it was Thursday when Shelley Duvall passed away, I was thinking like, okay, that's probably going to be the start to our show. And then 3 other very significant people died in the subsequent days. This was not a great weekend. You know, I was thinking too, like, I don't know if you guys can remember, maybe we've talked about it on the show before, but like in light of the luridness of this week with the Trump assassination attempt, all these celebrities dying, the tornadic activity we experienced in the Midwest yesterday as well, or Monday rather, I was thinking about it, made me recall, do you remember the Boston Marathon bombing in like 2013?
Yes.
It made me recall that week, because if you remember what happened that week, the Boston Marathon bombing took place, I want to say, on a Monday. And then I think it was Tuesday or Wednesday. It might have been Wednesday. The fertilizer plant in Waco, Texas exploded. And that didn't feel like as big of a story. There's like 14 people who died, if I remember correctly. It wasn't as big of a story up here because I think the following day or that evening that it happened, the Midwest, Illinois, in our region, we got like 8 inches of rain. Yeah. And we got flooded. And I remember there was some Lyle that were underwater. And I remember it was horrible. And I remember thinking that week it was just one of the worst weeks I've ever seen for America. Like every coast had something going on, like some sort of insurmountable tragedy. Then you had the manhunt for the Boston Marathon bombers, the brothers, and everything. I felt this kind of similarly this week, where it was like every time you looked at your phone, it was just like bad news or something. You know what I mean? Something damn depressing. Yeah. So why not talk movies? That's my rationale over here. Movies are my lane, and I will Paul Walker myself in it. That's my philosophy in life. It's Dom looking suspect over there. Dom, how are you?
I am doing okay. Steve, thank you so much for that wonderful Tom Cruise-esque monologue circa Oscars 2002 for us. But for me, it's the middle of the busy season, and I am just trying to, honestly, not staying busy because that's just inherent to my situation. So honestly, I am here. I am still standing. Do you guys do spring? Do you guys do spring cleaning? Do you guys do spring cleaning?
Yeah, I just did it. I'll talk about it more during my thing, but I just literally did it.
Yeah, it's like I haven't had time to do that, so the house has just gotten the townhome has just gotten worse. But hopefully, I don't know. I'm talking mundane stuff. It's like a laundry list of things that get pushed to the side as the more important things get taken care of. But man, when you vacuum that carpet after a long while, feels good. Feels good to walk barefoot in it,
doesn't it?
Oh yeah.
I wish you nothing but the best, man. I know we're all kind of going through our own busy escapades over here with work and things like that. Joe, how about you, man?
I'm unemployed right now. Not for anything bad. I will be starting somewhere new very soon. I left my old job. I will be starting somewhere new very soon. So I'll have more info on that next week during our show. I just like Dom as well, though. I did some spring cleaning while I'm in this transition period between 2 jobs. Got a bunch of clothes to donate to Goodwill. Not only did I vacuum the carpet, I was washing the carpet as well. I went to this guy that lives right down.
Steamer?
No, what's it called? I think my mom just literally has like a shop vacuum that like also has like steam cleaning capabilities in it and everything. So I don't know if it's called a Stanley steamer or if it's like one of those products, but like it's just a big orange thing. I don't know how else to
Some
describe
steamer,
it.
yeah.
Yeah. Guy right down the street from me, he does interior cleaning and exterior cleaning for cars. I went there and like cleaned up my car in the inside, paid him some money to do it. So car got cleaned out as well. I basically just been cleaning, just basically getting ready for this new job, new gig, everything. And along with that, I got to go see 2 movies because I just had free time to squeeze in both of them. I got to see Long Legs, which I liked. Wish we were reviewing that on the show. Don't want to go too far ahead of myself though. And then I saw Fly Me to the Moon, which I will get into later in the show. But other than that, man, I mean, it's even though like I've been at home, I will be having some relaxation time coming up very soon. And I'll get to enjoy just basically the rest of this little break I have between jobs right now.
Nice.
Good for you, my friend. Yeah, I will say, Dom, if we wouldn't have had to go fund your therapy, we would have probably switched Long Legs instead of Fly Me to the Moon.
I think you can handle it, Dom, but I don't want to be responsible for your therapy if you don't.
But is it a Silence of the Lambs-esque thing?
Yeah, mostly, yeah.
Yes.
It's more that than it is like horror, right?
I don't want to say too much.
Okay.
It has its fair share of gruesome moments.
Yeah.
Got it.
Very gruesome moments. Yeah,
it just makes you think like, well, fuck, what if someone actually is doing that out there? Like, not to this extent, but like similarly.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's a movie that gets really under your skin.
Yeah.
In a very deft manner. I know I liked it more than Joe, but I admire so much about that movie. The way that movie has dread lurking in almost every scene and anxiety.
I've talked to so many people like Steve who loves it. It's probably going to be on his best of this year. I wouldn't be surprised if it's number 1. My friend who saw it on Saturday, I was texting Steve about it. He saw it. It's his favorite movie of the year right now. But the 2 friends I went to go see the movie with as we were leaving, they were like, man, that was one of the worst things I've seen this year. And I just had to keep to myself. I'm like, whoa, okay, I liked it, but like, I mean, all right.
It's curiously divisive. It's a very curiously divisive movie. That being said, we shall talk Fly Me to the Moon, which I'm going to start by saying with Fly Me to the Moon. And I don't think people are like, it's a little confusing, and I get why people think this. I almost half thought it until I looked into it. This movie is not based on anything. This is not.
I hope not.
This is a movie that's not based on a true story, inspired by a true story. It's not even based on a book. This is a completely original story. Bill Kirstein and Keenan Flynn have the story credit. Rose Gilroy has the screenplay credit.
So this is really just historical fiction.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. As far as we know, this this is not a true account by any means. Which I was wondering when I very first saw the trailer, I was like, was this like a covert thing that they're coming out with right now? Like they tried to put this shit on, but admittedly, it is a crafty little premise. Basically, the movie, there's a lot going on here, but to summarize it pretty succinctly, it basically follows the relationship between a marketing executive played by Scarlett Johansson and a NASA launch director played by Channing Tatum, who's in charge of the Apollo 11 mission. The marketing specialist gets brought into NASA because NASA's approval rating and public perception amongst the American people is waning because the space race is now like in year 9 and we still haven't gotten to the moon yet. So she is brought in to kind of like make space great again, if you will, make people like space again.
Sell the moon.
Sell the moon. So she launches a plethora of different ad campaigns. There's a kitschy little bit about how Tang. It's the second fucking movie this year where Tang is part of a prominent joke. Where like she launches like astronaut related campaigns to like companies like Fruit of the Loom and Tang and stuff like that. Well, basically then she's recruited by Woody Harrelson, who's this government official, who eventually asks her about like 40% of the way through the movie or something. he says that like this Apollo 11 mission is too big to fail. And what she needs to do is work on staging, choreographing, and potentially filming a quote unquote fake moon landing in case the real one fails. So she uses like a hangar as a set where they recreate the moon. They hire actors to play like Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin and the astronauts and whatnot to basically use this feed if for whatever reason the mission fails or the feed cuts out that the American people see on their televisions and things like that. So there's a lot going on in this thing. There's a lot of different supporting performances. You got Jim Rash in this movie. You got Ray Romano, who me and Catherine were talking about when we saw this movie too. Yeah, I finally figured it out, I think. Does Ray Romano not always look like he is just unearthly fucking confused as to what he is doing in a movie? That's Ray Romano's definitive like personality trait. He looks like he's so confused as to why he's in this movie and why anyone would want him in this movie.
Ray Romano would be perfect for like an A24 obscure horror film, man. He would just fit that perfectly as just somebody walking around in some haunted house not knowing what's going on.
I've always liked Ray Romano. I loved him in The Big Sick. He's always been a really good supporting performer. I would almost bet that he's going to get a lead role, which is weird to say because he was on a damn sitcom for so many years. Yeah. I think he's going to get a lead role, like a Brendan Fraser-esque whale-like, hopefully better, but whale-like lead role that reminds people how like charismatic and likable, like why everybody fell in love with Raymond in the first place.
He's been in and out every few years of movies. I think Brendan Fraser straight up just wasn't anything for a long while. Yeah. Right.
No, I mean with Ray Romano, that is true. I mean with Ray Romano though, maybe it's not an apples to apples comparison.
Right, but I know what you mean. It's like bringing him really back into the mainstream. Yeah.
He's in the background for so many movies and he's a supporting performer in so many movies. I think he's due a lead role that for people to remind how good he is. But anyway, so you got a lot of different people in this movie. Anna Garcia's in it. Colin Jost, who's Scarlett Johansson's husband's in this thing as well. He's on SNL, I think. But yeah, this movie, I really wish it was better. It was better. This was a kind of a strange movie. First off, I'm going to throw it to you in a second, but I'll throw it to you, Joe. Just be warned. This movie kind of has, and I know I kind of made like an unnamed reference to it. It kind of has a tone that's similar to Unfrosted, which I was not ready for this soon after that movie. It has like the tone of this like awkward liminal space where it tries to infuse the story with like satirical happenstance and an overabundance of themes and actors who can't seem to get on the same page with what the hell they're supposed to do with this material. Like it feels like it feels like Channing Tatum and Jim Rash, who plays the commercial director, who's directing the fake moon landing. It feels like those two are in a completely different movie. Like the way they operate in their own spaces. It reminded me a lot of Unfrosted, and not in a good way. Not as bad, not as insufferable, but it had that quality to it. What say you, Joe?
This movie is the perfect parent movie. If you are stuck with your parents for the day, this is a movie to go with. It will please them. It's safe. It's funny to them. It will remind them of a time they were probably around and grew up in. Or maybe like, it's early enough. They're like, oh my God, I remember when my parents talked about this and everything. This is a perfect parent movie. And I can say that because I brought my mom to go see it. And she loved it from beginning to end. She loved it because it had recognizable names. Channing Tatum. Oh, he's a cutie. Scarlett Johansson. Oh my God, I've seen her in so many rom-coms and everything. Stanley Tucci. Devil Wears Prada. Hello. So many more. Woody Harrelson, even. Ray Romano. My mom loved. Everybody loves Raymond growing up. So this has like...
Not to interrupt you, I think you're thinking Jim Rash is Stanley Tucci. FYI.
My bad. Yeah, my bad. Sorry.
You're good. You're good. Don't want to give people the wrong impression.
I thought I got them mixed up. My bad. What was I going to say? This is like the perfect formula for something for an older demographic to go see. And even when I went to go see it with my mom, I took her to, I think, a 4 o'clock showtime. Yeah, we went at 4 p.m. Dude, I'm not even kidding. The theater screen I went to, I'm surprised this movie is doing bad at the box office because this was almost sold out at my theater.
Wow.
The only row that was available, and we were in like the medium size screen at my AMC. The only row that was fully available with nobody sitting in that row was the very, very front. Even like the first 2 to 3 rows up there, they even had people sitting up there scattered. But like the sections that start to like, you know, raise up as like, you know, you keep going up the stairs to whatever rows, honestly, there was people next to each other, shoulder to shoulder the whole time. So I was like, oh damn, I guess this movie is doing good at the box office, only to find out it wasn't. Now, with that being said, now how does it fare for somebody not above the age of 50? This is probably like one of the most generic movies you will see this year, honestly. And it's sad to say because it has so much potential. It really does. From its cast to the setting to, yeah, the premise of it. And I think the issue here is that, and I don't know how you guys felt about it, about halfway through the movie, I went, why do I have the feeling Apple wanted this? Because this is an Apple Plus movie or an Apple, like, you know, film. Why do I have the funny feeling Apple wanted this to be a TV show? Like a short, like, you know, miniseries? And then just didn't have time to do it. Maybe the writer's strike played an influence into it or something. And they decided to make it a feature-length film that they can eventually sell their platform with. Like, oh, you can stream Fly Me to the Moon on Apple TV+. Because this movie bounces around so many plot lines, so many characters that I forgot at one point. Like, I thought the climax of the movie was on its way. I'm like, okay, they're gonna go get this TV for the spaceship, and then it's gonna launch and go away and everything, and yada yada yada, whatever, and then we're done. And I'm like, oh wait, that's right. There's a whole plot line in this movie because Steve's absolutely right. You don't get to it till way later in the film. The whole moon landing, faking it, the like, you know, like shooting it on a set and everything. You don't get to that till way later, and I completely forgot about it by, like, you know, the third act of the film. And the last 20 minutes of this movie, which, by the way, this movie's way too long for its own good as well. This movie should have been like an hour and a half tops.
That
man.
TV scene, not to interrupt you, that TV scene you're talking about, you think that's like the climax.
Yeah, that's what I thought. I was bail. I was.
This is like but here's the funny thing. Like, I remember, like, Catherine had a phone. I checked her time. I'm like, we still got like 35 minutes of this thing left, and like, and the sense of urgency leads you to believe that you're like in the waning like 20 minutes of it or 15 minutes.
Yeah,
but
and then
you're. It's true.
They then have like the little falling out part between the two leads. Then they have okay, we have to plan something, so we have to do like a bunch of scenes of us doing the planning while I explain the planning, and then we gotta have some hijinks thrown in there, and it's just like, I was like, oh my god, dude, please just wrap this up already. I was just sitting there and I'm like, I'm waiting for this to end. I don't know when it's gonna end. I'm hoping very soon, but like the last 30 minutes of this movie, it became literally annoying to me. And I hate to say that because it's like, I sound like I'm being harsh on the film, but like, I will say this, I actually enjoyed the first half of this movie. I thought the way it was setting up and how it was bringing in the characters and everything, and how Scarlett Johansson's character plays into NASA as a marketing specialist, and Channing Tatum is like, you know, more mission driven about it and everything, and then how the two correlate with each other. It's like, okay, she's really giving you guys the money so that you can continue your testing, so that you can continue doing this. It was like, okay, I'm enjoying this part, especially like, you know, as somebody who has been in marketing, worked in it, as well as worked in like a government related field, that I know like also what it means to sell a government basically in some sort of way. It's like, no, I kind of get this, like, you know, what Channing Tatum's coming from and Scarlett Johansson's character is coming from. So I was enjoying the first half. It's the second half that I was like, wait a minute, I'm realizing something here. These two leads don't have chemistry with one another. Scarlett Johansson and Channing Tatum, great actors, love them to death. So many movies that I love both of them in. Together on screen, I felt nothing. I'm going to leave it there for right now. Before I go any further, I'm going to pass it off to Dom.
Well, I don't know about you, but Channing Tatum can get some, because he's still a great looking guy.
No, he is.
I want that to be the official stance of Sleepless with Steve. I want to make sure that's very plainly stated. I am a sucker for moon landing movies. Apollo 13 and a half or 11 and a half, right? 10 and a half. The one with Jack Black narrating, you know.
Yeah.
Link later. I that was a fantastic.
That was a fun
movie. Should have been nominated for an Oscar for the animation. You know, Hidden Figures, as so sappy and corny as its life lessons were, it did shine a light on the people, the actual historical people in there. You know, I love Apollo 13. You know, anything involving NASA during that time. I really want to start watching For All Mankind, which is that Apple TV
That's an amazing show.
series.
You should.
Because
It's an amazing
I love
show.
alternate history. And yeah, I love alternate history. I play a lot of alternate history video games. Dude, Inglorious Bastards. Alternate history to the nth degree. I love it.
Beavis and Butthead do the universe.
Yeah.
Sorry.
No, you're absolutely correct. I like historical fiction. I love that space race era of things, and I was really digging this movie. But yes, like you gentlemen, something just kind of happens, and you feel deflated about halfway through, and it just doesn't quite pan out. There's a lot of charm and a lot of fun here, and there's a lot of moments for the individual actors, and certainly some exchanges as well. But when it comes down to the ensemble nature of things, it just doesn't quite come together. And I think ultimately that comes down to the writing and directing, which is a real shame because this is a really good set of cast here.
Yeah.
No, I agree. And I think, Joe, I think that the rotten core of the movie, and maybe that's a little extreme because I don't think the movie's terrible, but I think the rotten core of the movie is the lack of chemistry between Scarlett Johansson and Channing Tatum. I'm not gonna lie, too. Like, I was reading this when I was making my review. Channing Tatum was the second choice for Cole Davis. Do you know who the first choice was?
I actually don't.
It was Chris Evans.
Oh my God.
And that would have been better.
That really would have been.
This is one of those cases where it was like what happened was filming, I guess they had to change the production schedule, and he was probably shooting Brave New World at the time and couldn't commit like he originally could. So he dropped out and they got Channing Tatum. I'm a huge Channing Tatum fan. I can't wait for that movie Blink Twice next month.
Same.
That movie looks weird. That movie looks interesting. It kind of reminds me of like an early Adam Wingard movie in a way. And I think I would love to see Tatum in a villain role. I'm a big Tatum fan. I'm a big Magic Mike fan. I liked even 2 years ago, he had two really good movies in The Lost City and Dog come out. And I've always really just been a big Tatum fan. I think he's more to meets the eye.
Every time I see him in something, I'm always like, damn, man, good for you from where you came from. Because I used to see you in movies. I'd be like, this guy can't act for shit, man. And then now I look at him like, dude, he's honestly one of my favorite actors whenever I see him in something.
You think it was just you think it was just misdirected here?
Yeah.
You think that's what it was?
I think he was miscast.
Was he? Was he?
I think he's miscast. I think that his sort, and I think his character sucks too.
Yeah.
I think his character is unlikable. I don't even by the end, I didn't feel ingratiated with Cole. Like I see him as like a wet blanket character. He's this character that's perpetually pessimistic. He should have been an astronaut, but wasn't. He's perpetually pessimistic. And then you have Scarlett Johansson, who I think is good. It gives a good individual performance here. You have her as like this motor mouth advertising executive, and she's just zippy and perky all the time. And, sees the world through a completely different set of eyes than him. And in the movie tries to have this opposites attract energy with these two. And it's like, now these are two opposites that just aren't attracting right here. These are two atoms that aren't coming together in any sort of cogent way. The movie has a lot in common, I think, with a lot of like, I could see this movie in the 70s being made with like Rock Hudson and Doris Day.
Yeah.
Like the movie Pillow Talk came to mind. Like it has that sort of, or like a Dean Martin kind of a role in a way. I know this is, kind of like after his time and everything, but the story itself. But the point being is you needed like two really strong commanding leads that had chemistry with one another. And these two don't.
No. And Evans and Scarlett Johansson would have, because they've been friends for so long that they would have had like at least that kind of chemistry with one another, that like they've worked with each other before. They really know how to bounce off each other. And everything, and I feel like that just would have been a better pairing, honestly. And I I didn't think Channing Tatum was bad in this movie. I thought he was just fine. But yeah, his character is just so unlikable, man.
Insufferable.
Like, there's really nothing to like about him.
It doesn't help either that tonally this movie goes between, okay, is this like a peppy Catch Me If You Can kind of thing? Which is fine, because like Catch Me If You Can does oscillate between quite serious and quite very, very, clever and slick. But for some reason it doesn't quite match up in parallel. Because even I'm thinking about that movie. And with that movie, it's like, yeah, there were some very serious points where, Leo and Tom Hanks are kind of having like breakdowns together, but there's still that underlying current of like, everything's going to be cool and fun here. And that's not to say that it gets so dramatic, but there's one scene in particular with Channing Tatum. He's got those cards really stacked against him here, where he's being interviewed and it gets like really serious. And I think it's probably because, well, I know Catch If You Can was also based on a true story, but so, something about like the Apollo 1 disaster. There's just something about that gravitas that I don't know if it needed to be in. I know it was a central point of his character, but I don't know if it needed to be driven home that hard. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. It really undercuts the screwball comedy energy.
Yeah.
Bringing up Apollo 1, isn't it?
Because you go, which is, that's okay, because you're trying to really put the history in historical fiction, but like to go that hard into it, and then what, 15-20 minutes later we're like having a fun romp with this fake moon landing set. I was like, it's kind of some whiplash there.
It's like, what's next? Is the first kiss going to be under the Challenger? You know what I mean?
Oh God.
Oh, come on.
But no, you're right though. Like, you're right. As Woody Allen once said, comedy is tragedy plus time.
Did you have that one ready to go?
I just literally thought of that when you brought it.
That's pretty good. That's pretty damn good.
But what that drives home, though, the point, I guess, overall, is that the movie is very tonally inconsistent. It doesn't have the consistently snappy banter that you expect kind of from a screwball comedy. But and there's an element of this movie, especially with the story, that like don't take it so seriously. Don't take it very seriously. But then it tries to throw you like serious little things like that, like Apollo 1, or like commentary on the Nixon regime at the time.
Or Scarlett Johansson's background to her character. It's just like, okay.
Yeah, it tries to throw in like some really serious stuff that doesn't really play well. You know who's also like, and it sucks that he's got such a small part, but I also really wasn't too enthused with his character either. Woody Harrelson, I feel like doesn't add much either. No, he just
he's just like an antagonistic force that they have to deal with at some point.
And he pops up like you could tell he probably had like 2 days on the set, and there's a few moments when he like sort of pops in just to kind of annoy Scarlett Johansson. The one scene that bugged the hell out of me is she's at the airport. Scarlett Johansson's at the airport and Woody Harrelson fucking appears out of nowhere. And I'm like, oh, we're going to pull this. Oh God, he knew where she was going to be type shit. Like, and again, maybe in like, if this movie had adopted maybe a screwier tone, I keep using that sort of word, it might have worked. But I'm also glad it didn't, because I really didn't need to see another unfrosted spiritual sequel.
Yeah.
I feel like we're in this weird era now. Like, and I know Unfrosted was kind of like its own sort of like.
There's a lot going with Unfrosted that
capitalistic biopic. You know what I mean? About like the creation of a brand, but it's like not accurate either. And it's
also Jerry Seinfeld
about that. And it's
who has not been hot in a while.
But we're in this weird era now of these movies that like focus on these really big like historical events or product creation, but they do so in such like a shits and giggles way that it's like hard to take them seriously. Yeah, and you don't really know what they're trying to convey.
I know the comparison you're making, but let's not even remotely compare. We'll remotely compare, but like let's be clear that in no way is Unfrosted even close to the masterpiece that is Fly Me to the Moon.
No.
I will watch Fly Me to the Moon a million times.
Same.
In a row before watching Unfrosted once. Like that was
Unfrosted,
bad.
Unfrosted was insulting to watch. This wasn't. Like I still was having fun and I found it charming, and sometimes it's just for everything I found charming. Here's a better way of saying it. For every step it took forward with the movie, that I was like, okay, you're working towards something. It took 2 steps back. Like I'm like, okay, maybe we want to be more serious with this movie. Okay, now there's a black cat fucking up the whole NASA base for no reason. Is he the reason why Apollo 1 failed? Like, what the hell?
Oh my God, dude, the lore of that. Dude, that'd be so funny. No, I always think back, for me, when I hear screwball comedy of the early 20th century, or, first half of the 20th century, my mind goes to Arsenic and Old Lace. I don't know if you guys have seen that one in a minute. That's to me, that's I don't know if it holds up, but I think it does, because it had to have held up because I watched it as a kid. But for me, that's like the perfect, that's the sweet spot in terms of like, oh, we're dealing with dark subjects, in terms of like people are dying, getting murdered, but also it's a screwball comedy in that sense. And you know what? Kudos to Fly Me to the Moon. This is the closest I've gotten. I felt that way in a while. I feel like I'm missing out on maybe one or two things, because even other great comedies in the past however many years, it doesn't hit that same way. And it's funny enough that Fly Me to the Moon does get fairly, the time period, even though it's the 60s, it's still kind of in that sort of era. And it's in a good, it feels close, somewhat close, and it's in a really good way. Whereas on Frosted, if you classify it as screwball, it's very 21st century screwball, very like 2005 screwball, in a way that I never liked. I don't think I ever truly liked.
Yeah.
And that's, so I'm going to give some props to this movie.
I don't want to cut off you, Steve, because you seem like you're about to say something. But with the new update to Zoom, it doesn't have the timer above our heads anymore.
What?
If you've noticed?
I have it in the corner over here.
Yeah, I see it now, and I noticed that we have 1:55. I just wanted to bring light to that.
Yeah, it's not. It took me a second. It's in the upper right corner now. Shout out Zoom Workplace.
Yeah. For me, it's just not on the screen at all until I hover above the meeting.
Okay. All right. No, I was gonna just lead in. It was funny. Dom makes a point that really my last major point on the movie that I'll save for coming back from the break. But there is a comparison, stylistically speaking, to a mid-2000s, very forgotten kind of a screwball romantic comedy set in the 60s that this movie reminded me of. It's a panache kind of like of different 60s kind of comedies and romance movies. Stylistically, this movie reminded me a lot of it. It's very forgotten. But I think it's gone on for the people that have seen it in recent time. It was kind of indifferently reviewed when it was released back in 2003, but it's gone on to be a little bit more loved now by people who do watch it. So I'm going to hold that comparison until after the Zoom Workplace sponsored intermission. We will be back here in just a couple of minutes as Sleepless with Steve will wrap up and Fly Me to the Moon and get to memorializing a litany of great people that we lost over the weekend. Don't go anywhere. Sleepless with Steve, live on YouTube. There's a lot I can talk about this movie, and I'll chime in with my opinions. You guys kind of know where I stand, maybe not the nuances of it. Anybody who's read my review knows where I stand. Anybody who's had to listen to me recommend this movie, and for the last 6 months, knows where I stand. But I got a lot of "you're right" texts this weekend, too, so I'm very proud of that. With that all being said, I'm throwing it over to Joe. First things first. What do you think? General thoughts. Cha-cha real smooth.
So, last year when you were talking about your favorite movies of the year that you saw and everything, and you put Shithouse on there, and you were praising Cooper Raiff. I mean, Steve was practically saying, like, this is a guy to keep an eye out for and everything. I didn't take that one bit, and I never went to go see Shithouse. But then Steve told us about Cha-Cha Real Smooth. And that he saw it at Sundance, and that it was probably going to be, again, in his top 5 favorite movies this year, and that he can't wait for us to get it. And then slowly but surely, it got the Apple TV Plus deal and everything else, and now we're finally here. And all I gotta say is, Mr. Cooper Raiff, dude, welcome to the fucking club of, like, one of my favorite upcoming people to watch right now, because this movie was a real treat. I don't know if I love it as much as you, Steve, but I had a great time watching this movie. I never looked at a director, writer, and star of a movie and really felt like this guy feels... I mean, I'm like that meme where it's like, wow, he's just like me. It was just like, I was watching Cooper Raiff the entire time, how he acted in interviews, on screen, on camera, just the way he writes dialogue for, like, 22-year-olds and everything. I'm like, this guy gets it. This guy knows how like people our age talk, people our age like deal with their emotions and stuff. I'm like, this guy totally get that. There's scenes in this movie. It's just like, yeah, anybody who came straight out of college thinking like, man, I'm gonna hit the pavement running, I'm gonna be hitting stuff, I'm gonna get a job that I want right out of the gate, and they didn't get any of that. It's like, man, he hits every beat that I think any young 20-year-old can relate to. Right down to the, like, the feeling of being like in love and thinking that like this is it, like it's do or die with this person when it comes to falling in love. Especially in this movie, Cha Cha Real Smooth, man. This was like, I didn't text you, you're right, because I've been waiting to talk to you about it on the show. I didn't post my star rating on Redbox or whatever the hell it's called, Letterboxd,
and I noticed that too. I noticed that. I was like, he's embargoing it for me and me only.
I watched it on Sunday night, and I was like, all right, that was really damn good. I think I need to watch it again. So I watched it again today during my lunch break, and then just kind of played it while I was working in the background. And I found myself constantly turning over to the screen to watch certain scenes. And eventually, like, as we got closer to our work event that I had to go to, I was just like, all right, I'm like, it's like 30 minutes left of this movie, and I'm leaving in 20. I'm just going to, like, watch the rest of this movie and everything, because screw it. Yeah, man, no, this was a treat, man. This was a big surprise. I know you've been like, praising this movie like crazy and everything, and I went into it thinking like, all right, at the very least, it's gonna be good. Like, it's just like the way this kid has been praising this.
Back and better than ever after our Zoom workplace sponsored intermission. This is Sleepless with Steve. If I could talk. Good to be with you today. We're talking Fly Me to the Moon, kind of going into closing thoughts here. But Don brought up a point, though, about how this kind of screwball comedy tone is a little bit rare. There's not a lot of movies that tackle it in the modern day. You know what this movie reminded me of? I said it reminded me of this like mid-2000s movie that nobody remembers. The movie Down with Love. The movie Down with Love with Ewan McGregor. And if I can remember the actress's name, and it was Renee Zellweger. I thought that's who it was. I want to make sure. That was actually, I don't know if it was the debut, but the guy who went on to direct the Ant-Man movies directed it, Peyton Reed.
Oh, Peyton Reed. Yeah. Okay.
And it is a really fun sort of like Rock Hudson and Doris Day riff. It's set in the 60s. It's about a woman who like advocates for like feminism and stuff. And then she meets this guy who's sort of like, the epitome of like the 60s male. And it's really lighthearted. It's cute. It was kind of indifferently received back when it was released in 2003, but it's also just, I think, a really disarmingly cute movie. This movie reminds me a lot of that movie in the way that it looks, because I think this movie looks great. I didn't look up the budget until just now. It's $100 million. I don't think it's making that back, but the money did go to some pretty nice sets, some really good costuming. The great, I think Oscar-nominated Mary Zofers is the one who's behind the costuming here. Shane Valentino's production design. I think the whole movie looks great.
Yeah.
It's immaculately detailed. It has a really unmistakable 60s vibe to it. The costuming's on point. Yeah, it reminded me, though, of Down with Love in look. It doesn't nail the tone like that movie. That movie really knew what it wanted to be. And it also wasn't tethered to like a massive historical event too, where it felt the need to like make a commentary on the state of society while doing it.
No, you're right about that. The movie actually, production-wise, yeah, I mean, I think it very much sells its look very well. It's a nice, it looks great with the costumes. The NASA setting itself, I think they do a good job at like, just actually making it look like NASA. I've never been to NASA, but it felt like NASA in the 60s. Like they perfectly captured it. Along with just other things too, like, other settings they visit and whatnot. What was it? Even the, I don't know why. I don't know why this just popped in my head, but when they go to like the senator's like house for like dinner and everything, like it just seemed like, yeah, this seems like a 60s senator's house, no lights on, candles only, all this stuff. It's just like, what the hell is this?
Especially one from Louisiana.
Yeah.
We can probably head to closing thoughts on this. I don't have a ton more to add to this movie. I wish I did. Joe brought up the point that this Fly Me to the Moon feels like it maybe they were optioning it initially as a TV series based on everything that it houses.
Feels right. Yeah.
This also, and I wondered this too. I mentioned this to Catherine. I was like, this feels like an Apple TV movie, and it was supposed to be.
Oh.
It was supposed to be direct to streaming. I just saw that. It was supposed to be an Apple TV movie, but the test screenings were really positive, so they thought they'd option it as a theatrical release. Yeah, this is not one of the stronger projects from Apple, and I mean, you know what's also interesting too with Apple on an external note, like I feel like recently, you know, quality aside, whatever you think of these movies, they have not been really strong at the box office. Napoleon came and went really fast. Killers of the Flower Moon, that was more of a case of just the movie being too damn expensive.
You hear that?
Killers of the Flower Moon didn't make money. I don't think this is going to make money. This opened far less, far less money than I think they were anticipating. I'm not saying Apple's in trouble, but I'm like that. I almost think they have to reevaluate their film division when it comes to the budgetary limitations of what these movies can actually recoup. Now, granted, this isn't a 3-hour drama like the previous movies were, but I think it's still worth mentioning. This is 2 out of 4 stars for me, though. I think, like Joe said, this is a good movie to take your mom to. Especially if she hasn't been to a theater in a long time. I think this is kind of a nice movie in which to take your parents to.
This was my mom's first movie of the year in theaters.
Was it really?
Yeah. She's watched stuff only at home so far this year. This is the first movie theater movie she's been to this year. Yeah.
That's funny. But yeah, it doesn't work. It didn't work for me mainly due to the lack of chemistry. And this is another movie with like 4 different endings too, which is becoming an increasing problem. I feel like in movies is that these movies, they don't know where to end. They don't know what the final song should be. So they keep going. And the last 30 minutes of this movie almost shredded my goodwill for the movie just by the fact that it takes so long. It features characters having to espouse their motivations and everything aloud to each other. And it's like, I kind of would have been better off not knowing this and not wasting an additional 30 minutes that I don't think adds to this movie. This movie could have been maybe a pretty good 95, 100-minute movie. It's a mediocre 2-hour movie. It's 2 out of 4 for me. We'll go Joe, then Dom for closing thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, like I was saying at the start of the review, this is a perfect crowd-pleasing film, especially for people who are older. I would say like over the age of 50, they might actually really have a good time with this movie. Because it very much seemed like that with my audience. My audience clapped at the end of this movie. I was just like, shit, maybe I'm just out of I'm like, shit, maybe I'm just out of touch. And then I realized,
can we celebrate them watching this instead of God's Not Dead? Let's
celebrate exactly that though. Like that's how I felt about when I was like leaving the theater. I saw like it was people like my mom's age, or so around like 55, everything to like 70-year-olds, 80-year-olds leaving the theater going, that was a great motion picture and everything. I was like, okay,
more.
like, hey man, they are. Like, they're supporting a theater, like,
I get it. I know.
We can't always be happy about like what they choose to go see with their monies, as long as they're going to the theater and keeping it alive for us.
Come on, Gertrude, let's go watch Kinds of Kindness. Here's a picture.
Gertrude, I heard this Longlegs has Nicolas Cage in it. Let's go see that.
Oh my God.
Hope you brought some Depends.
Ooh, they have another Despicable Me. Anyways. Not inside. Old people jokes aside, I do think it's not as bad as I might have made it seem as harsh as I was coming in from. I genuinely did have fun at times with this movie, but it does overstay its welcome. If it wasn't for that 30 minutes, I probably would have given this a half star higher. But for me, it is also 2 out of 4 stars.
I'm really going back and forth here because the charming parts were really, really charming. I can't deny that.
No.
It just does not. It's the opposite of greater than the sum of its parts. It when it comes together, it feels like a lesser product. Really much so. But I'll give it 2.5 out of 4. A really merciful 2.5 out of 4 stars. Like just reaching over that line, just because I haven't felt much like it
In a
in a
while.
while.
That's
Like
fair, actually.
There is a little bit of bubbliness. There is like some funness to it that I wish it just consistently, not completely static, but had closer to that line than before. I was really rooting for the movie. Like within the first 10, 15 minutes, I'm like, okay, you know what, we're all right here. But then, yeah. So I'll be nice. I'll be nice to it.
That's our review of Fly Me to the Moon. We will segue to this. Normally, we start the show if somebody notable or somebody that's impacted us in some way, shape, or form in film or music or something of that nature. We do a little in memoriam segment at the beginning of the show. There are just too many people this weekend. There's too many people to not make this like sort of the core, back half of the show here. How I'm going to do this is I'm going to give just a brief overview of I think the four most prominent individuals that passed away within the last week's time, and then I'll throw it over to probably go Joe and then Dom again. If you guys want to touch on all of them, you can. If you want to touch on a couple, who I guess impacted you or who you want to touch on the most. That's totally up to you. But we lost a lot of great people this week and some really good people, and two people that really just embodied kindness, I think, in unique ways. The first person we lost was a week ago, just under a week ago, was Shelley Duvall. And Shelley Duvall obviously needs no introduction. She was in a lot of different movies, whether it was obviously The Shining, which is her most popular role. She was in Macabre and Miss Miller back in 1971. She was in Nashville. I think that was kind of her breakout role shortly before The Shining. Woody Allen's Annie Hall as well. Just a really expressive actress. Had a really kind of like new old Hollywood feel to her that I think was really appreciated in movies. It was really intriguing, like how in the early 2000s, which, we don't recall that well, like this kind of minutia, but she retired from acting. And then she was really private. She was very, very much a private person, never gave interviews or anything like that. And then it was that Dr. Phil episode several years ago, like 7 years ago, if you guys remember that, when she made her first like public appearance and interview in a while. She looked drastically different. There was a lot of like, it felt like a little bit of an exploitative interview. It was kind of weird that she went that route to do it, but like it led to all sorts of commentary about like her mental illness, her deteriorating physical condition. And I almost wondered like, I'm glad she reappeared. But at the same time, I'm like, I wonder would she have gone and done that if she knew that's what was going to happen? And there was reports. I don't think it's ever really been concretized exactly the details of it, but like she struggled with mental health. She struggled with her own physical health in later life. She passed away. She wound up dying at 75 from diabetes, which is really crushing to hear too. So Shelley Duvall passed away last week. There was Dr. Ruth Westheimer as well, who passed away. She was 96. Some people were even shocked that she was still alive, quite frankly, and I can see why. But Dr. Ruth Westheimer, I think this one was probably of all of them, the one maybe I would just go out on a limb and assume you guys are the least familiar with. Dr. Ruth Westheimer was a sex therapist. She was very popular in the 70s. I've seen her on shows like Dick Cavett before in the past. She was on Johnny Carson. And you got to remember, this was like the 70s and the 80s when this kind of stuff was not openly brought up. But she's this 4'7" little German woman who's talking about like using cucumbers to spice up sex in the bedroom on TV. She's charming as shit. And she's really well spoken. She's a Holocaust survivor as well herself. I highly encourage you. I think I was even saying a little bit on the air this week on my radio show, like, look up Dr. Ruth. She's a character. The one thing you guys might remember her on, she was on Between the Lions.
Oh, okay.
She was on Between. I was hoping we were on this. We were on the same page. She was Dr. Ruth Wertheimer on Between the Lions. And it was a crafty little thing. Look it up. It was a crafty little bit what they did with her, where I watched a clip over the weekend where she would be a therapist for words. And there was like, she would have like a U and an N in her office, and the UN would be crying because it felt incomplete. And then she, in her German accent, which I can't emulate, but she goes, I have just what you're looking for, on, brings in the letter F and puts them together. And then she's like, now you're fun. And then she's like, I'm Dr. Ruth Wordheimer. And it was so creative because it was like, as a kid, you had no idea who she was, you know, and even I think it was a blink and you miss it little skit for parents. But that was my introduction to Dr. Ruth, was on Between the Lines. Did I unlock a core memory for you?
You really did, man. In Between the Lions. Like, that just popped into my head.
Since we're talking about her, the thing I remember her from is from an episode of Quantum Leap, which was the show starring Scott Bakula. And so the very quick plot of Quantum Leap is that this character effectively travels through time and space to inhabit certain people throughout history.
Yeah.
And one of the people that he inhabits is Dr. Ruth. And then that whole episode, he is just playing Dr. Ruth. And I just like, what the hell is this? And it was like really, really funny. And it was pretty fun. And that's when I found out her work. Because like in the show, Scott Bakula's character is like, oh my God, now that I know what's happening in the 1980s, I can go back in time and like stop the spread of AIDS if I wanted to, through Dr. Ruth. But no, it's such a random thing that I remember. And honestly, I don't really have much to say about these four people other than the fact that Quantum Leap still kicks ass. But continue.
Rest in peace to Dr. Ruth, though. She's adorable, and I think that there's a great story about her to be told in movies or a show or something.
I think there's a documentary.
There is
released 5 years ago or something. Yeah,
there is a documentary on her.
Okay.
The other another one that we lost to is this one broke my heart. Richard Simmons. Richard Simmons is awesome. He always was. He was very popular in the 80s and the 90s. It was more the 90s, I would say. But what he was a fitness personality, a fitness guru, as he was known. And basically what he did was he democratized exercising at home for people. If you didn't want to buy expensive dumbbells and exercise and workout equipment and ellipticals and things like that, Richard Simmons DVDs were a really fun way to exercise, lose weight, and just enjoy yourself. He's most famous through his Sweatin' to the Oldies line of videos. I'm not going to lie, I've sweated to the oldies a time or two myself. And it is a lot of fun. There's something really fun about him. He's just a big personality. He's got people of all different looks and creeds and figures behind him while he dances to songs like the Macarena and It's My Party. He comes up with all the choreography himself. He talks you through it. And he's just immeasurably kind. And I think that's what made his disappearance from the public eye in the last like 10 or 15 years a little bit hard to stomach for people, because he was everywhere in the 90s. He has so many DVDs and VHS tapes. He was everywhere. And then he just vanished from late night TV and everything. And there was a lot of conspiracies about like exactly why he vanished and things like that. I think honestly, he made his money. Maybe in the later years, he gained weight and he just wanted to be left alone. I don't know what the case is, but I think this one hit me the hardest, not only because I'm a big Richard Simmons fan, but also that Pauly Shore short film, The Court Jester, that was based on Richard Simmons, that came out this year. That's excellent. I think what made this death hit harder for me than others was just the fact that like I feel like we were kind of we didn't get a Richard Simmons renaissance that I think would have really been something to behold. And maybe he didn't want that. That's fine. That's totally fine. But I feel like there was one more act for Richard Simmons that we're not going to see now. He passed away at the age of 76. And then last but certainly not least, this one was sad. Shannon Doherty passed away at the age of 53. Shannon Doherty, I think, has had cross-generational appeal completely. She was in the show Beverly Hills 90210, multiple different iterations of that. She was in Charmed. My personal favorite role, she was Renee
And
Brody,
Mallrats.
played by Jason Lee, in Mallrats. She was his girlfriend in Mallrats. I thought she was terrific in that. Kevin Smith had a wonderful eulogy for her on his Instagram page. A big, long write-up about how he had like a crush on the Canadian girl and then got her for the movie he made, Clerks in a Mall. And he talked about how he said that they've been friends since then. And he's like, they were at a signing one time. And after he got done signing like an 8x10 for somebody, she would write dick on it and then he would write bitch on hers. They just had a really fun relationship. Shannon Doherty, though, had been sick for years. She had Crohn's disease in the 90s. She had breast cancer, which then spread to her lymph nodes. She had cancer that spread to her brain. She passed away finally from cancer at the age of 53. Which is sad in itself that she's so young. She was so popular in the 80s and the 90s, and she was just like she had this sort of bad girl reputation that preceded her, but she wasn't really like that as an individual either, by all accounts. That was sad too. So we had Shelley Duvall, we had Dr. Ruth Westheimer, Richard Simmons, Shannon Doherty, a treasure trove of just really great people, a lot of kindness left the world this weekend that I really wasn't prepared for in more ways than one. Joe, any commentary, anything that you'd like to add on about any of the people that we've lost?
I mean, I was gonna say I don't know much about Dr. Ruth until you said about the In the Lions part, so that's awesome to know. I'll say this about Richard Simmons: never watched any of his videos, only seen him make like cameos and stuff, like Arrested Development and other things as well, where he played himself. But he's kind of like one of those people that I just associate with like an era of time. Like I see his face, it's like,
Yes.
Okay, we're there. Like that's how popular he was, because I used to see, like as seen on TV ads for just like those VHS collections of like stuff or music collections. Like now that's why I'm talking about music, like whatever. Like, but it would be like that, and then a Richard Simmons new training video when when my grandma was watching The Price is Right, or as the whatever the hell the soap operas were called that she used to watch with the
Young and the Restless.
Young and the Restless. There we go. I was like, there's one with an hourglass or something. Shelley Duvall. I mean, look, she's in one of my favorite films, which is The Shining, and I feel bad for all the stuff she went through because of Kubrick in that movie. But she gave one hell of a performance where she's losing her shit the entire time. The one that, like, obviously, like, and you could tell from my initial reaction when Steve mentioned her, was Shannon Doherty. Immediately when he said Mallrats, like, when he mentioned Renee, I was like, oh yeah, Mallrats, like, that's where I know her from. I also know her from Heathers as Heather. So this is probably the person, like, of the four. I don't want to say, like, oh, I like more. It's just the person I've connected more to because I've seen them more stuff and I've recognized them more and more things. But all four of them, I mean, like, just seem like, very nice people, like Steve was saying. It's sad to see we lost four faces that were just kind. Especially hearing all this stuff about Dr. Ruth now. It's like, damn, that's sad to hear. But I mean, hell, good for her for almost making it to 100, man. Like, that's incredible, though. Like, let me just say that. But that's all I really have to add to the conversation.
Dom, send us home.
Same here. For in the grand pantheon of celebrity, you might think these are C-listers or D-listers, but honestly, thinking about especially Richard Simmons, you may not even know who Richard Simmons is, but you know the parodies of him if you're our age or older. And that's his ubiquitousness. With Dr. Ruth, certainly she was I kind of want to go back and like as a historical like study to see like what was the really groundbreaking thing she was putting out there, at least in the mainstream during her time. And certainly with all four of these folks, it's just make your mark, man. just go for it. Because even though you may not be Channing Tatum or Scarlett Johansson in a movie together, you'll certainly put a lot of smiles on other people's faces, and you might be talked about in this little show. So yeah.
Rest in peace, Shelley Duvall, Dr. Ruth Westheimer, Richard Simmons, and Shannon Doherty. That's our show today. Ended right on time, too. That's our show today. Sleepless with Steve, back next week. We got Twisters next week. Cannot wait for this movie. Cannot wait. I'll tell you right now, one of the things I'm most looking forward to about this movie is the soundtrack. The soundtrack. I mean, did we see some of the names that are on this soundtrack?
Yeah,
You got
yeah.
Warren Zeters, Luke Combs, Megan Maroney, Lainey Wilson. Very country heavy soundtrack. Bleeds a little pop. You got Breland and a song with Shania Twain. That can go. That's gonna go one way or another.
You know, when
Tyler
everybody
Childers.
told me about like Country Thunder, that festival that happens in Wisconsin, this is the lineup I'm expecting. Because like they oversell it to me, my friends, when they told me about it.
You got Charlie Crockett doing I just noticed Charlie Crockett's doing a cover of Ghost Riders in the Sky.
Oh.
And I love Crockett. Bailey Zimmerman, Benson Boone, Jelly Roll on a couple tracks. They even got that yodel kid, that Mason Ramsey of all people, on the damn soundtrack. They got every country singer you can think of that's popular right now on this soundtrack. And that Ain't No Love in Oklahoma song is a capital B banger. That needs to be in a scene with a tornado ripping through. Yeah, I'm excited. It's directed by Lee Isaac Chung, too, the guy who made Minari, one of my number one favorite film of 2020. Fun fact. So really excited to see him get this promotion, too. So we're talking Twisters next week, and whatever news comes across our desk, we will see you back here in a week's time as the summer persists on. Until then, thank you so much for watching Sleepless with Steve. Joe Viso, Dominic Guanzon, and yours truly. This has been Sleepless with Steve.